to episode 2 of the 12-Step Buddhist podcast. In this episode, we're going to get into more depth on a variety of topics. If you listen to episode 1, you'll know that that was an introduction, kind of a what we're going to be doing, plan of action, that sort of thing. Didn't really get into a lot of detail on a lot of content. But now that that's out of the way, ready to move along. I've taken in some of the advice about audio levels and so forth, so I hope that this is loud enough for you and that it works. This is a home studio, so we are definitely working with those limitations. I'd like to begin with a 5-minute meditation. And I got this from a book probably 20 years ago. My early recovery, I'm going to say probably around 80, maybe 85 or so. The book is entitled How to Meditate by Dr. Darren Littlejohn, and I'll put a link to this on the podcast page on the website. The website is the12stepbuddhist.com. So I'll read a little bit about what this is, and then we'll do it. Contemplation is a structured meditation of the outer way. You take the object, hold it at a comfortable eye range for you, feeling free to move it closer or further away as you please, and just look at it. It is very hard. Give yourself permission to make constant slips from the directions. You will make them anyway, and will be much more comfortable and get along better with this exercise if you give yourself permission in advance. Treat yourself as if you were a much-loved child that an adult was trying to keep walking on a narrow sidewalk. The child is full of energy and keeps running off to the fields on each side to pick flowers, feel the grass, climb a tree. Each time you are aware of the child leaving the path, you say in effect, "Oh, that's how children are. Okay, honey, back to the sidewalk," and bring yourself gently but firmly and alertly back to just looking. Again and again, you will suddenly notice that you are thinking about something else or translating your perception into words or something of the sort. Each time, you should say the equivalent of, "Oh, that's where I am now, back to work," and keep looking. So what I use for this meditation is a rock, and I've probably taught this to at least several hundred people over the past few years. I'm just looking here and see it says, hold the object you have chosen at a comfortable visual distance for you and be flexible about this distance. Do not stare at one point on the object. Dynamically explore it without words. Treat it as a fascinating new continent you are exploring non-verbally. Do not stare or strain your eyes during the exercise, because if you do, you will increase the illusions. And Dr. Littlejohn warns in this book that if you're ever doing any kind of meditation practice that you get a bad feeling about, stop. Maybe give it a break for a few months and come back later. I can certainly attest to having some things come up in my meditations over the years, so it depends on how hard you want to push yourself and what you're trying to do, but don't do anything that you feel is dangerous or harmful. Well, after all, it is just looking at a rock. But all right, so let's begin. 5 minutes. I'll give you a moment to grab an object. It doesn't have to be a rock. It could be a coin, a pen, anything that you've got sitting around the desk, a paperclip, whatever you want. The specific object is irrelevant. The technique is what matters. So I'll walk you through it. Ready? So just take a look at the rock, whatever your object happens to be. And first notice the tactile sensation, what it feels like. try to notice the subtle feeling in between your fingertip and the object. The space between the object and your nerve endings. Just noticing how it feels, the roughness or smoothness, any particular characteristics about the rock. You can notice how heavy it is. You can hold it in the tip with your palm open, the tips of your fingers, and just kind of bounce your hand a little bit and notice how heavy it is or how light. Move your hand very, very slowly as if the rock is driving it down, and just notice that point of pressure where the weight is actually, the gravity is actually having an effect. Notice where you have to give resistance to keep your hand from being weighted down. It's a subtle level of awareness. You can hold the object up and simply experience the visual perception of the object. I keep calling it a rock, but you know what I mean, whatever you're looking at. You can do this also without an object, but more on that later. And the idea is, what is it? What does it look like? Or more specifically, what do you see? And your mind will want to give an answer, a qualification. Well, I noticed that the rock has a bunch of flaws in it. It's not quite a perfect rock. Well, can I trade this in for a better rock, please? Hey, that guy's rock's more perfect than mine. That's not fair. How come everybody's always getting the better rock? And so on. If you're an addict, you understand this thinking. So simply just notice that and be present to the visual input as it's coming in. There's, I don't know, if you're a neurologist out there, correct my number if I'm wrong, but I'm going to say there's 100 billion neurons receiving the photon light information reflected off the rock into your brain, and your brain is computing that and putting that into a whole and saying, oh, that's something I remember. That's a form called a rock. If you remember the Plato analogy of the cave. So we make a decision about what it is. And that's a thought. So notice that. And go back to the visual experience of the rock. Now, you can also use sound for this, although if you listen, I think you'd have to listen pretty carefully for quite some time to notice the sound of the rock. But if you happen to have an object, you can do this with the sound of a bell, such as when I ring the bell at the end of this meditation. You can do this with a taste, if your rock happens to have a taste, or you can do it with a smell, if it's a sulfurous kind of rock, something along those lines. Remember, it's not the object, it's not the sense that you choose, it's really noticing and being aware of the physical experience of the object. There's you and there's the object. There's what's happening. What is happening? Notice that. Simply be in the present moment awareness of this object. Any sound or sight or other sensation which comes into your awareness, Just let it come and go, and bring your attention back to the rock. Notice it. Allow yourself to be present with this particular experience. Listen to the sound of the bell. Notice as it fades. So I didn't really give you very much of a background on who I am and where I'm coming from. My name is Darren Littlejohn. I am an addict. And I have written a book entitled The 12-Step Buddhist. It'll be out on March 10th, 2009, published by Atria Beyond Words. And I use the term addict comprehensively to cover any type of addiction, whether it's to an event, person, substance, or process. So you ought to be able to identify regardless of what your particular addiction is. And without going into a long story, just to let you know, the encapsulated version is that I got clean and sober through a treatment center in 1984. I got seriously involved in spiritual journey type activities right off, and that was all very appealing to me. It's one of the reasons why I was interested in the 12 steps, looking for that kind of cosmic experience or spiritual awakening. Although I had an idea of what that is, but it wasn't. Let's just say it changes over time. So what that is not what you might think it is, actually. So I stayed in the program of recovery. I maintained my anonymity in terms of, about which particular program or programs I attend, but I refer to it as 12-step recovery. And I stayed in that for 10 years. And then I decided to enhance my spiritual program of action with some psychiatric substances, psychoactive substances, I should say. And that led me to the chronic downfall and subsequent return in 1997. So I've been back to recovery since December 4th, 1997. This is all in the book, so I'll not bore you with it now, but just to give you an idea of who I am, where I'm coming from, one of the things that I really had to do was come up with some ways to prevent that relapse again. And I just got deeper into the meditation practices that I'd tried and combined that with various other things. So that's kind of a little bit of history. So addiction is powerful. And if you're a Buddhist and you understand a little bit about attachment, and maybe addiction is attachment gone wild, attachment really out of control. So you can define your addiction, if you like, from the 12-step programs as being out of control, unable to stop when you want to, unable to control the amount that you take, most definitely unable to control the results of participating in the addiction, whether that's spending the rent on, Texas Hold'em, or snorting it up your nose, or binging out on food, chasing a lover, being hooked on being depressed, masturbating incessantly for hours in front of the computer or whatever. It it all applies. So in some 12-step programs, they don't want you to talk about specific things and other than what they're particularly focused on. And the object of the 12-step Buddhist is to treat all aspects of addiction to really get to the root of the problem. So anybody can benefit from participation in the methods outlined in the book. And participation in a 12-step recovery program of your choice that's relevant to your particular addiction, and in an ongoing relationship with a spiritual teacher. So anybody can use the podcast, anybody can read the book, anybody can benefit. Certainly enough people are affected by our addictions that aren't necessarily addicts. We have a meeting called 12-Step Sangha, which we hold weekly, and you can visit 12stepsangha.com, download the format if you're interested in having something like that in your area. Kevin Griffin, I think, also has a document on how to conduct Buddhist-oriented recovery meetings and so forth. There are ways to do this if you're interested. It's not a substitute for 12-step recovery. It's a supplement to your existing recovery program. Somebody came up to me after the 12-step Sangha meeting the other night, and the gal said, I'm in Coda, and I don't really want to quit drinking. Am I welcome here? I said, yep. We're not going to decide who you are, what you should do, what your addiction is, and how you should treat it, how you define abstinence. We have several other members who are, they go to Overeaters Anonymous and that sort of thing, and, they define their period of recovery differently. It's not necessarily in terms of years. It might be days. And we don't want to downplay, that progress for them. So however you define your addiction, whatever your addiction is, whatever you're addicted to, we define it the same way is what I'm trying to say in terms of the loss of control. Abstinence, it depends on if you're in a government program. Abstinence could be measured in terms of less drinks or whatever. Most of the 12-step recovery programs in terms of substances deal with complete abstinence from any mind-altering substance for a sustained period of time, as what they call clean time. Like in Narcotics Anonymous, they would call that clean time. In Alcoholics Anonymous, they would call that sobriety. But as I mentioned, it's different for different addictions, and we want to be open and flexible to understand that. It's all deadly. Addiction causes suffering. We have someone recently, my partner, Tysa, told me about a friend who, her husband is an older woman. Her husband has cancer and has been being treated for cancer with some serious pain meds, intravenous use of that. And she'd been grabbing the syringes and having a little bit for herself until the other day she grabbed 3 syringes and overdosed. So addiction is serious business, and you just never know. And the not knowing is really kind of part of the definition, the unpredictability. Sometimes we can have a couple and be okay. Other times we wind up in Tijuana with our shorts pulled over our head, getting kicked in the teeth by a angry cellmate. So, on the website, I've put a lot of work into this to really make it fun and interesting for anybody who comes by, and it's just laid the groundwork. But there are a couple of things about the website I'd like to mention to you. One is that if you go to the 12stepbuddhist.com and read any of the articles or look at any of the pages, you can give it a rating system. And The ratings on some sites are stars or thumbs up. And on this one, it's Buddhas. How many Buddhas do you give this article? I guess if you give it 1 Buddha, it's not even on the path, and if you give it 5 Buddhas, it's totally enlightened being. However you look at that. So drop by the website, read some of the blog articles, look at the pages, and don't forget to give it a rating at the bottom. That's kind of fun. There's another section on books recommended reading. I'm talking to a few people asking about, what do you recommend I read and that sort of thing. There's so many books and so many teachers, but if I had to pick just one, well, there's more than one. There's a few on there, but if I had to pick just one, say, from each author, so I put a handful up there. And there are more comprehensive lists, but take a look at that. If you had to go to a desert island with 1 or 2 books, what would they be? And those are my choices. You can order those through the website. Well, it takes you to Amazon, but at any rate. The other section is called Ask the 12-Step Buddhist. So this is a way to interact and get your questions answered. If you ask a question, I'm going to put a button on the form that says, "Would you like to stay anonymous?" Because I want to respect that if you don't want to be mentioned. But for now, I answered one question on the last podcast, and for today we have a question from Terry. And Terry's question: Terry is a female non-Buddhist not in recovery. The question: I have started attending Al-Anon because my adult son is lost in serious substance abuse. I am trying to understand the 12 steps. I live in a smaller city in the Midwest, and it's very Christian. Support groups here reflect that, and I feel like a fish out of water. I'm totally agnostic and don't believe in anything without proof. How can I get this God stuff to work for me? It just seems like a niche church group to me. Well, Terry, you're not alone. And I talk about in the book what the numbers of recovering people are out there and how they're measured and how they're not measured. And the long and the short of it is that I think there are a lot more people out there like you that shy away from the 12-step programs, particularly if you're not on the East or West Coast in a major metropolitan area where things might be a little bit more progressive. If you're in a small town, they might be made up of Bible thumpers and fundamentalists of one sort or the other. And there are certainly, I was talking with my sponsee the other day, and there are certainly fundamentalists everywhere, in Buddhism and in the 12 steps. So how do we deal with that? And really, that's what I wrote the book for. The idea is that if you really read the 12 steps and 12 traditions, I would recommend taking a look at either the AA or the NA. NA has a book. You can also get that. It's actually one of my top few recommended books, the It Works, How and Why 12-step book from Narcotics Anonymous, and also the AA 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. And those are really the fundamentals, pieces of literature in the area. If you look at those and you really read between the lines, or maybe in the NA book it might be a little bit more current, written in 1993, as opposed to the AA book is, I think, 53 or 4, 5, something like that. And maybe a little bit more current and a little bit more open. But, in general, we define a higher power our own way. And regardless of the rhetoric that you'd hear in meetings, please don't throw the recovery potential out with the Christian-oriented bathwater, if you get my drift. In other words, don't give up on yourself because of a misinterpretation of the true potential and power of the 12-step program. The 12 steps enable anyone to be free from any addiction. And if you go to some Al-Anon meetings, you'll learn. I think Al-Anon tells you to go to 6 meetings before you make a decision. If you go to those meetings, you'll learn that you might be addicted to saving the other person. That's a hard truth, but Al-Anon's a tough program. My mother-in-law is an Al-Anon, and she talks about that. It's another one of those things that's very difficult to know when you're coming in and out of abstinence. Am I fixing? Am I working too hard to be in control of that other person's life and so on? So that's kind of stuff that you learn in Al-Anon, and I think that, if you read their literature, Al-Anon has some good material. The Al-Anon Family Group website has a lot, so take a look at that. And if you're agnostic, that's just fine. You can define your higher power any way you want. And we'll get more into that when you read the book when it comes out, because I give you a lot of ways to deal with that. In the meantime, stay open, stay flexible, and understand that just because of what you're hearing in meetings, sounding a certain way that may not work for you, kind of look more deeply. Read the literature and really resonate with, the aspects of that which work for you. Okay? So I hope that helps, and stay in touch and let us know if you have any more questions along those lines. What I'm going to do now is tell you a little bit about a daily meditation text messaging system that I set up. You can get to that on the website. And you get a 12-step Buddhist daily meditation on your cell phone at whatever designated time you choose. And the whole purpose of this is to feel integrated and connected to your recovery from a 12-step Buddhist perspective. Have that daily meditation as a way to connect with that and something to focus on or practice throughout the day. You'll find the SMS daily meditation button on the website on the right-hand side. You can sign up for that. I've been using the one for the Dalai Lama for a couple of months now. I get a Dalai Lama message every day, and then I get my own messages, so it's pretty cool. I get one at noon and one at midnight. Well, Lama Zopa Rinpoche asked all of his students to commit to reading a passage, actually to reading the entire sutra, from the King of Glorious Sutras called the Exalted Sublime Golden Light, a Mahayana Sutra. It has a really long name in Sanskrit that I won't try right now. So I'm just going to leave you with a little bit from this sutra. It's at the end, in chapter 20, praise to all Tathagatas. Then indeed, the Bodhisattva, Ruchiraketu, rose from his seat, placed his upper robe over one shoulder, knelt his right knee on the ground, folded his hands in reverence toward the Tathagata, and praised the Tathagata. Lord of sages, you are gloriously adorned with thousands of enchanting virtues. You possess the marks of hundreds of merits. With your sumptuous complexion, you appear supremely serene, as 1,000 suns shining forth with dazzling light. Blazing with myriad rays, you are engulfed with light, resplendent with color like jewels of blue and white, gold, lapis, copper, and dawn crystal light. You pulverize Sumeru, the Vajra king of mountains. You illuminate tens of millions of worlds and soothe their fierce suffering. You satisfy beings with supreme peace. Your complexion and 6 sense powers are bright and beautiful to behold. Your form is a joy for beings to constantly see. Enchantingly beautiful, your hair, the color of a peacock, shines as a lotus filled with bees. You are adorned with the virtue of pure compassion. You have gathered sublime merit through concentration and love. Possessed of sublime minor marks in many colors, you fulfill beings with all happiness. Beautified by enlightenment's 7 wings, you are adorned with virtues such as samadhi. Giver of well-being, all peace and happiness stem from you. You are richly adorned with an array of profound virtue, and shine vividly in tens of millions of pure lands. Gloriously radiant like a fire's glowing light, you resemble the full solar orb in the sky. Endowed with all virtue, as is Mount Sumeru, you are magnanimous in every world sphere. Like cow milk, a conch, white lily, or the moon, white as pristine snow, the rows of teeth are lovely in your mouth. As the king of geese is graceful in the sky. The precious treasure, hair in the center of the horizon of your serene moon-like face, curls to the right, stunningly beautiful, like lapis or the sun amidst the sky, bright with light. This ends the 20th chapter, the chapter on praise to all the Tathagatas from the King of Glorious Sutras, the Sublime Golden Light.